Dean Kaler lays face down on the practice field. A bullet has passed through his spine, paralyzing him for life.
That's one thing I'll never forget about that day. Just seeing the looks on the faces of the students who were standing over me, not knowing that there was 12 other people out there shot. 4 of them bleeding profusely, dying on the ground.
Joe Lewis lays bleeding with 2 bullet wounds, one through his abdomen and one through his left leg.
I thought to myself, well, this could be it. And I was afraid that I was going to die. And so I made an act of contrition to say that I was sorry for my sins. And
I saw a girl being carried into the yard at Prentice Hall, and I ran over there with this rag thinking I could help someone, and I looked down and it was Sandy. Sandy was a friend, and she was so blue and gray. She had been shot through the jugular vein, and I didn't even recognize her.
And she was killed within seconds as she walked to her class, 400 feet away from the triggerman.
I remember the first person I saw was Jeffrey Miller, and he was lying very still.
One of the first to reach Jeff Miller's body is 14-year-old runaway Mary Vecchio, who only a short time earlier had been protesting with him on the Commons.
I thought it was Alan. I mean, I'll never forget running toward the body of Jeff Miller, thinking it was Alan, and how I felt when I looked down and saw Jeff lying in this pool of blood, and there was so much blood.
And we walked over toward another cluster of people, and they were standing around Bill Schroeder.
Bill Schroeder was an ROTC military science student. He was the all-American boy. He was not a protester, not a radical, not part of the demonstration. He was just there watching.
She said, "Barry, I'm hit." And I had no idea what that meant at the time. I mean, in split seconds I knew, but I didn't know. It couldn't be. It's impossible. What do you mean you're hit? As I went to stroke her cheek, I saw a smudge of blood on her cheek, and it had come from my hand, which was underneath her. So I realized at that point she had been shot in the back, and she was bleeding, and as it turns out, she was dying.
In the moments after the shootings, faculty marshals are told by General Canterbury that the Commons must be cleared within 15 minutes, or he will send the guard out again.
We were sitting sort of in rows on this little slope, and Glenn Frank was in front of us, pacing back and forth, and he was crying, and he was talking very passionately.
I don't care whether you've never listened to anyone before in your lives. I am begging you right now, if you don't disperse right now, they're going to move in, and it can only be a slaughter. Would you please listen to me? Jesus Christ, I don't want to be a part of this.
Finally, the sense that this terrible thing that had happened to these other people could happen to us finally got through.
Students slowly begin to disperse. The Commons are eventually cleared, and the wounded rush to the hospital. County Prosecutor Ronald Kane orders the campus closed and evacuated as news of the shooting finds its way to the students' families.
Got into my apartment, and I figured I better call Jeff and tell him to get out of there, and that he doesn't have to hang around during all that trouble.
So I called tried to get through to Ravenna Hospital, and I couldn't. I finally got a hold of a telephone operator, and she got me through. And I identified myself. I said, I'm Mrs. Krause, and I want to know how my daughter is. I want to talk to the administrator.
I called his number, and it rang, and then a young man answered, and I said, let me speak to Jeff. And he said, who is this? And I said, it's his mother. And he said, he's dead.
Well, he came on the phone. He said, oh, she was DOA. And that's how I found out my daughter was gone.
Well, my responses to the shooting in Kent was simply the fact that the people weren't behaving properly, and apparently they have asked for that sort of thing.
Yes, I do. I'm sorry they didn't kill more.
Really?
Really, sir.
More of the students?
Yes, because they were warned and they knew what was happening and they should have moved out.
My sister at home, who was with the other kids, was 16 when my parents went to the hospital to be with me, and she had people call on the phone to say that more of the students should have been killed, and I hope your brother dies. And she should have never had to hear it.
I remember my father coming in the back door, and before his hand even left the door handle, he saw me sitting there, and the first words that came out of his mouth were, they should have shot all of them. And I said to him, you know, don't you realize that one of those people would have been me then?
"10 days later, another student demonstration, this time on the Jackson State campus in Mississippi, ends in violence when state troopers open fire on a protest, leaving 2 dead and several injured. This results in the first and only national student strike in U.S. history.